Let's give a moment, a minute or two, and then we'll get started.
Jim Rittenberg in a documentary series support this day.
Yeah, it's 9. We want to respect the time of people who have come in. While we sort of warm up and kind of get ready for the second sort of edition, we did this one couple of days back, or probably day before yesterday, and mostly for folks from US in their morning time zones. And we thought of doing this for folks from the other time zones. So we will start in about a minute, and in case if there are more questions, we could extend this session. Right now we planned for 90 minutes. We could extend it for 10 or 15 more minutes probably, just so that if there are any more questions here. First of all, thank you very much. Good evening, good morning, depending on whichever part of the world you're logging in. Thank you for taking the time to attend this workshop. We are really excited to have all of you join us today.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute and started talking. Yeah, thank you, Venky, for getting us started here. Before we get going, maybe Venky, let's do a very quick round of introduction. I think most people know you, but if there are some people who don't, maybe just baseline, why are you talking about this and why should people listen to you, Venky?
Yeah, most people know you as well. So, let's we'll not really spend time on introductions and stuff. My name is Venky Ramachandran. I live in Hyderabad. I'm an independent agri-tech consultant, analyst, and researcher. I've been sort of running agribusiness matters since 2020. Yeah. And Rhishi, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Rhishi. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm also an independent agri-tech consultant for the last couple of months. Before that, I worked in the corporate world at companies like Bayer, Google, Amazon, a couple of startups. And I also write a weekly newsletter called Software is Feeding the World and run an independent consulting company, as I said, called Metal Dog Labs. So Venky, let's get going. It's 2 minutes past the hour for folks in India. I shouldn't say India, everywhere, wherever you guys are. Maybe who's the farthest? Let's check on it. Is anybody here from Australia or New Zealand? I know there are people who have registered from far off places as well.
Yeah, feel free to use the reactions there. If anyone is, feel free to use the reactions to show whatever you want to, sort of communicate.
Yeah.
If not, there are folks from Canada. Okay.
Yeah. Canada is late there, guys.
Yeah, there are folks from Singapore, Australia. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Today, of course, the hottest topic on Earth, depending on which part of the planet you are, is largely AI. For those of us in agriculture, this is a very hot topic at this moment. And the idea of doing this sort of came to give a very grounded view of what are the possibilities that really exist. We think this is an epochal shift. And we are not seeing this from a usual tech hypist kind of perspective here. We will go down to details as to why we are seeing what we are seeing. Here's a quick sort of an agenda what we plan to cover here. We will talk about a few basics, set the ground in terms of what is AI. Today, I'm 38. I have seen probably 3 hype cycles, and Rhishi is, although Rhishi doesn't look that older, but he has seen 4 hype cycles, as our conversations in the past revealed to us. I've seen the social media hype wave, the big data social media hype wave came around 2009-10. the big data hype wave came around 2013, 14. And now the AI hype wave is starting in 2023, 24 around approximately. Each of these hype waves tend to shape our lives there. And the way I look about it from an agricultural lens is these hype waves are largely like the weeds, much like weeds. If you really go to a soil which is bare soil, you'll see weeds, in a frenzy of activity here. And that's what hype cycle is also largely about, as a frenzied activity to build infrastructure in a very rapid pace. Of course, with the hype, there comes a lot of, sort of doubts and confusions. And that's exactly why we are doing this here. The agenda here is largely simple in terms of, we'll talk about what is AI, what is AI here to stay, what are the common mental models to make sense of AI. We will talk about 5 interesting use cases, and we'll go down to the depths of it. And finally, we'll talk about what are the groups of innovators. How do you sort of frame the kind of people who are betting on AI, and what do you really need to get things moving? Rhishi, you've seen more hype cycles than me. What has been your learnings?
Yeah, I think, the examples that I'm much older than Venky, so I was there around during the dot-com boom and bust time as well. And when you are in that cycle, now thinking back, through all these cycles, it feels weird. And when you're in that cycle, you have all these sort of mixed emotions, right? One day you think like this is going to change the world. Next day you think this is nonsense, and this is not going to work. And, you didn't mention some of the other hype cycles, which, depending on the time horizon, crypto and NFTs and all those, those are still blockchain. And the time horizon is important as well. But, mobile internet sort of, dot-com era was another. And now we don't talk about dot-com because it is so much part of our life. Social media, mobile, we talk about it, but not whether this is here to stay or not, but it's like, what are its impact? And AI is, in that sense, not brand new. It has been around for some time, but because of ChatGPT, yes, metaverse is another hype, by the way. And we don't know what's going to happen there, right? Time will tell. Again, it takes time sometimes for some of these things to play out. And so what we want to do here is we want to start with some of our priors. But before we do that, before we reveal what our priors are, we would love to get a poll from you guys as to what do you guys think. And on your Zoom windows, you will see a poll pop up. 1 second. Yeah. And there are about 5 questions. It should not take you more than a minute or 2 to answer these questions. And the reason we want to pop this poll right now is, and talk about our priors, is because we want you, everybody who is attending, to know what lens we are looking at this from, right? What are our priors? And some of them are debatable, some of them are not, depending on who you are. But yeah, let's give everybody a minute or 2 to vote on this, and I'll end the poll, and then we can share the results. And then we'll see if what Venky and I have been thinking about matches with what you guys are thinking about. And hopefully there is a difference of opinion, because then that will lead to a better discussion, or a robust discussion, I should say.
Yeah.
And one more sort of, as people are voting on this, just one sort of housekeeping item. We don't want this session to be like Venky and I, we talk for an hour and then we go to Q&A. You feel free to unmute yourself or post your question in the Q&A chat there, if you have a question on a particular topic that we are talking about. And we want this to be more of a roundtable conversational session than 2 people talking for an hour and then we go to Q&A, right? We want it to be more interactive.
Yeah, if there's any very, if you want to really, feel free to challenge us also. We are not really the pontificating here as experts saying this is how things are. We are sharing our perspective, and I'm sure many of you who are joining us must be in the weeds working on. I say weeds in both a metaphorical and a literal sense here. working on some of these aspects here. So feel free to challenge us, our perspectives, and we would love to sort of dialogue with you on some of these things that we're going to cover today. Yeah.
I think we have about maybe 3 or 4 people left. If you want to submit, if you don't want to submit, that's fine. Maybe, we'll probably give 1 more minute.
Sure.
And then we can end the poll.
What is interesting is we see people sort of agreeing here, and I think there is also the fact that whether the technology fad is also, yeah, I see interesting responses there. Yeah.
All right, I think we already 10 minutes past the hour, so maybe I'm going to end the poll and then share the results, right? So apologies if you joined at the last minute and could not vote on this. So let me end the poll here, and then let's share the results with the group. And any sort of initial reactions looking at the results, Venky, from your side?
No, I think it's these are for diversity of the group here. I think these are expected here. Let's get to sort of specifics here as while we talk through our session, and then maybe we'll also sort of reference back to some of these data points here. Yeah. What is interesting for me the most which catches my attention is the kind of people who are saying AI benefits a lot accrue to farmer. So yeah, I think that's also interesting aspect here. Yeah. So we'll get started here. This is a very, we want to set the ground for basics definitions here, just so that, today there's of course a whole lot of debate here, but we want to stick to, one second. Yeah. We want to stick to very simple definition. That is, whether you use mathematics and software codes to teach computers how to understand, synthesize, and generate knowledge. Now, the trickiest part is the part where he talks about similar to how people do it, right? And I think that's what is the source of all the confusion we have right now about, whether AI will take over, the fears of AGI are overblown, and here, and the other aspect here is also that it's a computer program at the end of the day, like any other. And we will get down to specifics here in terms of why, why some of these definitions are worthwhile mulling over here. If you see there are certain parts where it is a program like any other, and if you look at it in another way, there are certain parts that are not like the programming, it's like any other program in some sense. So again, a bigger picture here. Today, there's a lot of talk around generative AI, but we forget to see that it's a part of a larger, bigger Venn diagram where there is supervised learning, which is what you see in your online Amazon Go checkout, self-checkout stores, where there are a bunch of people behind and assigning labels. There is also the reinforced learning where you see largely from a self-driving cars, where there are carrots and sticks that are given, and through the the data and the model sort of learns from it. Of course, there is also the unsupervised data, and this is now today happening. There has been an explosion where both AI systems and human systems are sort of constantly tweaking their models based on what data is. So we wanted to give you this bigger picture so that you don't get consumed that there's only generative AI at this moment there. We will talk about generative AI, but the focus is also largely on the bigger picture of AI in at large here. So this is our priors here. Rhishi, why don't you maybe talk about what is the one that is most exciting for you, when it comes to what has been your sort of understanding and perspective and how you're seeing this?
Yeah, I think, as we flash the results of the people who are here, I think a lot of them sort of jive with, what priors we had. I think the one that is a little bit controversial here potentially is that AI will increase jobs. And the second one, which I'm very excited about, is that everyone will have an AI sidekick, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's almost a plural. It's not almost, it is going to be a plural. Everyone will have multiple AI sidekicks, is my expectation. Because even now when I'm to do research, I use, ChatGPT, Gemini, I use multiple tools to help me with my research. I think AI will increase jobs is an interesting one, because there is a feeling that this kind of technology is going to make human beings obsolete. But if we think of AI as another technologies, which in sort of the same vein that a lot of other technologies have come in the past, a lot of these new technologies, what they typically do is change the nature of your job, and it creates new categories of jobs. And that is my expectation. Some of the existing jobs will change dramatically or might go away, but it will create a brand new category of jobs that many of them that we can't even imagine today, and they will emerge over the coming years. And I think it will be responsible of all of us to, and especially for people with kids, to make sure we learn some of these new skill sets and be ready for this sort of newer world, right? So that's sort of my thinking. I don't know, Venky, what do you think about some of these other topics here?
Yeah, I think, see, there is an aspect of it is increasing jobs here, right? I mean, I want to talk about that part here. In 2013, there was a very interesting report that said that about 47% of jobs will be likely to be automated and there. But I think today the landscape is very shifting very fundamentally here. The important aspect here is also right now what we are seeing is that with sort of more increasing level of competition, the value of data is increasing, right? And of course, the aspect of is also the sidekick here, right? In the sidekick, it remains that, we realize who is the one who's taking the decision. So maybe I think let's go down to deeper aspects here so that what we are seeing will get more clearer here. The fundamental mental model in which, we really think about this, Rhishi and I, is to look at it as a camera and not as an engine, right? Just like when we say a driverless car, it is largely misleading here, right? And likewise, when we say generative AI, we tend to think that what is generative is an engine that is producing. But what we are right now seeing is the magic is largely coming from the input and not necessarily from the processing ability here. So it's very important to therefore to see this as some kind of a telescope or a data camera. And of course, like I said, the earlier definition with Mark Andreessen's definition, it is a software, but it is a very contextual software. And what that means is that it can throw results that tend to surprise us. So if you're used to the old paradigm of software, which is very deterministic, which generates repeatable form of output, I think we will be up for a challenge and for a disruption of our understanding. So it is good to think about it as a serendipitous object because it's a camera. I see different aspects there. It shows me different aspects of the reality, and every data has its own set of intelligence that will start to show up in interesting possibilities here. Yeah. Rhishi, what do you see from the camera model here?
Yeah, I think the way I think about, and a reason I like this framework or this model is, before cameras were invented, it's not that human beings didn't see things. We, as human beings, we saw things all the time ever since, we walked this planet. But what the camera helped us do is to see things in a different way, in a different light, and see some new possibilities. Whether it's a camera, telescope, or a microscope, it helps you see things in a different perspective and highlight things that you didn't think about. So I think that is something that I find really interesting. And then maybe Venky, you can talk about, and there's something I really enjoyed how you framed it in the last session, which is the bottom one, which is about the user interface, right? Maybe if you could talk about that.
Yeah. So, see, historically, we've always seen, user interface as technologies have largely been acontextual, right? I mean, they don't necessarily exist in the field of context in which people make decisions. Right now, what we are seeing is as technologies become more contextual, they start to become like a user interface. And that's what we're seeing now with AI, where, like today, how do I build something? I'll go to a whiteboard and start to frame my ideas and then arrive at a certain sense of clarity. Now, we're starting to see that AI becoming that kind of this invisible whiteboard of sorts, where we are constantly dialoguing with it and then figuring out the reality there. So we will go down to a lot of details that sort of talks about why this era of contextual software and why is it important to see this as a whiteboard, as a user interface, and not necessarily as something that will generate, traditional idea of something that will generate and process an output here. So, so maybe this is the where the real juice is in some sense, right? We tend to confuse a lot of what humans can do and what AI can do, and I think it's important to look at this from the sense of evolution, right? A child is this is what Rishi talks a lot about this from the Moravec's paradox, where child can do perception and cognition and has a lot more data that an AI will find it extremely difficult to do. Whereas it is approaching the problem from the top, where there is digital tools and there is information being organized there. So the key aspect here is to sort of play to our strengths fully, and knowing that this will be a sidekick and when humans will be in control there. And that's what our fundamental understanding is. And we are seeing this now in an agri context also, right? With see and spray technologies, with robotics. They're slowly getting better at whether it's spoken language or information organizing and all of this. What is it that you're seeing from your consulting work, Rishi, in the aspects of what humans are learning and what AI is learning?
Yeah, I think you touched on it, which is how humans have evolved is from the bottom to the top. And so, if you think about this, if you want to pick up a cup of coffee, or you're working in a field and you want to pick a strawberry, a human being can do it fairly easily because we have learned that skill over millions of years, right? And that's how we have refined it. Whereas as you go up, spoken language came much later in evolution, and then written language came even later, and then information design and digital, they're sort of newer aspects. And if you follow the AI trajectory, AI and software is very good at the top and becomes harder and harder as you go down. And so this is important to remember as you are thinking about solving different problems. The problems at the bottom of this pyramid will be easier for humans to address, at least in the mid to long term, or maybe short to mid term, and much harder for AI to try to solve. So this is just to help you baseline how difficult of a problem you're going after when you're trying to use AI to solve this problem.
Yeah, I'll just make one quick comment in this here, right? For humans, I want to maybe give an example from the world of chess. When Magnus Carlsen came in the world of chess and sort of came into the game, one of the interesting comments that was made was his playing is largely very much has a machine-like qualities. And it turns out that he's been studying almost the last civilization, several hundred years of data, and has been playing with a lot of machines from his own early age there. And I think AI augmented humans, right? And that's what we are talking about from the bottom to top. When we start to collect data, I think the possibilities are very huge. And that's what we also, as humans who, because we tend to get stuck between whether a human or a bot, because we have not fully discovered what this human is, and we have not fully gone the bot way also. I think it's very important to have this fundamental clarity. And maybe we'll go down to specifics also here in terms of what is humans are very good at. Humans are very good at what system to pay attention to, right? What is my boundary? What is my the technical term could be called as a boundary intelligence, as Venkatesh Rao, who's one of my favorite thinkers, frames it here. And there's also humans are very good at why question, right? We've not yet figured out the intent part very deeply, as machines have not figured out that very deeply. Whereas what AI can do is aspects of when to take a decision there, what is the right time frame that should take, what is the right space instantiation that is good to take, what place do I choose, and what are the kind of agents who are going to play in there. Can I mimic some of the operations of an agent there? And that's where the how plan also comes. It's very defined, clearly defined how that could very well be automated here. Rishi, are there any other nuances that you're seeing here that is catching your eye at this point?
No, I think you touched on them. I think the why and the what is very important. And reason, Venki chose this seesaw graphic here is because depending on the time and how technology is progressing, these things are a little bit fluid. Sometimes the when is more on the human side, even the what, what systems to pay attention to in the future that might shift to the right. And then humans will be left with the why, which is the most important thing to anyway, right? So I think that human plus AI partnership is what is going to really drive progress. And people or humans who learn how to work with AIs, I think will have an advantage over humans who don't learn how to work with AI. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think maybe let's get down to specifics here.
Yeah.
I think what you have mentioned, the last point was very interesting, right? Like, because today there is a certain sense of reactivity that's also coming in. But I think once we understand what roles we play, I think it's important here. Rishi, why don't you maybe specifically, talk about some of these interesting use cases? I know these are a lot of use cases here in terms of product discovery, and I know you've done work in the in some of these, and I've done some work in few of these. What is the one thing that is very exciting for you in all of these use cases here?
Yeah, so I think more than picking a specific use case, what is exciting to me is how broad this range is, right? It spans the entire life cycle, depending on which type of issue you're talking about. But if you look at the time when column here, product discovery is when you're actually trying to figure out what product to build, whether it's a new genetic trait or a new chemical or a new insurance product, doesn't matter what it is, all the way up to price discovery. This is when you're trying to sell that product into the market, right? And it covers the entire range on the time horizon. Similarly, on the space horizon, right? Where are we doing this? This again covers the entire value chain and the ecosystem. And so more than one specific use case, I think what I find really exciting is, and this is why I feel this is not a hype, right? We already see a lot of use cases with the breadth of application that is here on this slide, right? I don't know. What do you feel about this, Venki?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the famous quote goes, right? The future is already here; it's just unevenly distributed.
Right.
I think we are seeing some of these there. Maybe let's get down to specifics here.
Yeah.
This is one of my very favorite examples from small holding context. This comes from the Hello Tractor's work in Africa. What you see here is in a country like Africa where there is a resource crunch, where do you place a tractor for tractor renting becomes an important question. And so as entrepreneurs, they have to take strong decisions based on real-time data on where do you place a tractor, right? And this is the kind of use case system we foresee to play out in the long term, right? There are various data layers on the left, as you can see. There is data layer from a land perspective, from a county perspective, from a farming services pricing perspective, and you place these multiple data layers on top, then you get to do interesting demand prediction models here. I think that's what I think this use case is important here. And we will see a lot more kind of aspects, a lot more kind of systems that are built in this kind of a design here. Rishi, why don't you talk about the precision operation part?
Yeah, absolutely. As Venki talked about Hello Tractor, which typically operates in Africa, these examples here are right here from my backyard here in California. I actually took these pictures from my phone last year at an event called FIRA. And what you see here is different applications using AI and a combination of an integrated approach of software and hardware and sensors to solve a particular problem, right? And Priyanka will address your question here in a second. Let me just finish this. And so on the left-hand side, what you see is a system built with computer vision, built with other sensors, and it has AI running on the edge. By edge, we mean you don't have to send the data to the cloud and wait for it to process and come back. The processor is right there on the field, and it makes a decision in real time, and it changes the behavior of the equipment to take a particular action. So on the left-hand side, it's an example of mechanical weeding where it is able to differentiate between weed and crop. And then it is able to send a signal to the mechanism of the tractor to say, hey, there's a weed right here. It activates the blade appropriately, and it removes the weed mechanically without using chemicals, right? And on the right-hand side is a similar example, but it is using a different technology. It is using lasers to basically zap weeds. It's a weird experience when you're standing next to this because you feel things are burning, which they actually are. But it is, again, a really great example of applying AI, and in a systems-based approach, you are combining multiple things together, and AI is making these equipment much smarter than they would be without AI. And it helps solve a particular problem of taking care of weeds, using less chemicals, doing more with less, and being more sustainable, right? And also addressing a labor problem, which is the big problem here in California.
Yeah.
So maybe, do you want to, did we answer the
Yeah.
question that Priyanka had there?
Yeah, I think she got
Okay.
it.
All
I
right,
just
cool.
explained it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So this is again another example from one of my clients, which I worked with some time back. This is again an example from a small holding context where price discovery is really a pain point. Now the question here is, when farmers go to the local markets, they have a receipt where they sort of, when the sale was made, what kind of variety it was sold, and whom did they sell to at what price. Now there's an interesting model that sort of came up with us using a data cooperative model where farmers get rewarded for sharing that receipt data. And what you see on the right is the actual data, which is a live hub of how much of times the farmers have shared this data. And once you start to sort of look at this data from a very collective sense, you start to make predictions of what the prices can go in. And that's where recommender systems and price discovery systems become extremely powerful, and they can disrupt a lot of the traditional traders operations there, because farmers are getting more empowered to take decisions based on the data that they really have. So this is also a phenomenal use case of how AI could actually empower farmers to take ownership and decide when to call the shot, when to sell, and at what price point to sell to a trader or a co-op or a middleman or anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe if you
go
back
ahead,
one slide.
Rhishi.
No, if you go back one slide, Venky.
Sure, 1 second.
Yeah. So I think this is going forward.
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah.
I mean, I would love to hear your experience of like what was, because you worked on this project, like what was the reaction from farmers who contributed this data, right? And how did they feel about like how did they experience the value that they were getting using this type of an approach?
Yeah, so see, I think initially there is some sense of hesitancy there, because traditionally, you want to be in the good books of relationship with your local traders and your local, middlemen who are there in your town. So there is certain sense of hesitancy there. In fact, one of the side effects of this was the traders union put an announcement saying farmers shouldn't share these receipts because they largely felt threatened. But that's also a good proof that the fact that the traders are feeling threatened a bit is also a good proof that some of these systems are working. So it's going to take a long time. This is not a silver bullet. Price discovery is an extremely complex problem, but through a model like this, I think it is interesting that we could also facilitate a bottom-up crop price discovery, which is, I think, the most interesting aspect here. Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing which you're highlighting and which we'll talk about more later is the data, right? The data is the one which is actually driving the model and the change. And as these models and these systems become more and more sophisticated, data is going to be the key for them to work. And I think it's going to change sort of the economics on how people think about data as well, right? So I think this is a great example that hopefully we can keep in mind as we talk about data.
Yeah, and I think not many people don't also fail to realize that right now we are actually facing a boom in data where people are given the explosive systems that we are building in. We really need good quality annotated data, and that could change the things for a very long time. So yeah, why don't you maybe talk about another aspect of what technology could do without necessarily disrupting humans' role here.
Right, exactly. So I think these are two really good examples. And, like something on the right, I've actually worked on a similar project. So one on the left, which is a little robot built by a company called Burro here in California. I mean, I think they ship all over the world, but, this is a big problem in California, which is labor. Labor is expensive. It is hard to find, and it's hard to find the right skill set. And I believe that problem is true across the world. I don't think this is a problem specific to California. Labor is a challenge everywhere. And so what this company did was really cool, which was to say, okay, what are the jobs that a human does in a strawberry field or a blueberry field or whatever, crop is being picked or worked on. And so if you go back to that pyramid, humans are using their hands to pick fruit because that's very difficult for a machine to do as of today. They load that up in boxes, and then they get it to the shed or the cooling place. And it's a very physically challenging job to do it all day long. It gets hot. And so if you break down all the tasks humans do, one of them is to basically load up these, either carry it to the cooler or the shed, or you can use a robot like this, where once you have finished picking your fruit, you just load the box on this robot. It has some carrying capacity, and now the robot, through the AI that is programmed onto it, it knows where to go. And so it automatically finds its path, it avoids obstacles, and goes to the shed. And now somebody can unload those boxes there. And now you have taken away some of the hard physical labor that somebody has to do, and augmented that with an AI-enabled equipment here, right? So this is a great combination of humans using their skills to pick fruit, and then some of the physically difficult work being done by an equipment like this. On the right-hand side is another example where the problem that AI is solving here is when you are combining in a big row crop field like a corn or a soy, there are certain settings on the combine or the harvester based on what you think is going to be in the field. And as all of you know, the conditions in a field change as you go from one part of the field to the next. Maybe the crop is more dense, maybe it's a little bit more mature, maybe it has more or less moisture, maybe the soil compaction level is different. And so what are the optimal settings for the harvester will change, have to change, but it is very difficult for a human to do it automatically, to constantly keep changing the settings. And so what the technology here is that it combines, some computer vision models, some other sensor data that comes through, and in real time, it is able to sense what are the dimensions along which the conditions in the field are changing. And that creates a feedback signal back to the controls of the harvester, and it adjusts the settings of the harvester automatically. And so that way you get the most optimal harvest possible given the technology that you have, right? And so this again combines a lot of different factors, and then AI runs on top of it to say, how can we make an equipment much more efficient to get better output from the field?
Yeah, I think it's a great example of what happens when you have traditional combine harvester and systems with computer vision systems, right? I think that synthesis is very, very interesting, and we see this in drones also, for instance, where what you could do, reimagine a drone when you add a computer vision or system also on top of it. Yeah.
What's the next example you want to talk about? Use case, Venky?
Yeah, maybe we'll also talk about the quality assurance, because we've talked a lot about agriculture. Maybe let's get down to food aspects here.
Yeah.
in food systems, I think grading and quality has always been a challenge, right? And traditionally, they've been done with a lot of biases, and whether you're talking about a local trader, he would have his own biases in selecting the right quality. So now we are seeing systems that can automate a lot of this process there. Now we can kind of automate some of these processes and bring in a lot of industrializing capabilities here. And I think that's a great aspect here. And and when you start to design these systems at scale, the amount of efficiency you get is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, this is an example of, we don't talk about it a whole lot, but, we talk about how AI can be biased, right? There's been a lot of brouhaha over, some of the AI results being biased, but this is a great example of where we can use AI in an unbiased way, right? So for example, if you're looking at tomatoes all day long and trying to judge as a quality inspector, which tomatoes are good and you want them to come in and which tomatoes are bad, you want to reject them. As humans beings, if you're doing that job all day long, you'll get tired. You will have your biases of like, oh, I like this supplier and that's why I'm going to rate them higher. We all of us think we are very objective, but unfortunately we are not. And so this is a great example where it not only reduces the sort of cognitive load and physical load on human beings, but it also can provide, unbiased results purely based on data and not looking at other factors. So that's something that is also very important to talk about here, I think.
Yeah, and also another aspect here is I think we received a very interesting comment in the last time when we did this workshop, right? Like today, this is not just the current, this is not the final state, right? Today now, as we build precision agriculture systems that measure the nutrition, right? We can go down to more sophisticated aspects of measuring quality, right? This is a question I hear a lot from, from people, those who are in the health tech, right? Like today, yeah, you're selecting the right tomatoes quality based on its shape, but how do I know it's been grown well? How do I measure the nutrition value here, right? In China, precision nutrition is picking up right now. So we could expect to see some of these technologies becoming far more sophisticated. And I think that is, that is very well could change some of the ways in which these procurement systems are done there. Yeah. So Prasad, I think to a question around rapid quality examples, I think there are a lot of players there. I think what Rhishi has given as an example from US context. In India, we have Agnex and we also have various players there. I'm happy to share some of the the questions here there. I'm happy to share some more examples here. So I also want to talk about another example, which is around climate change adaptation here. This is again a very centric to, this is an app called My Anga, which sort of tracks the weather data from the regions of Senegal and Kenya, and then advises herders, pastoralists, to change how they grade, how their directions in which they take their goat herds and cow herds, and then gives them a lot of real-time advice there. Are there any interesting examples from US also from a climate change adaptation that you're seeing, Rhishi?
Yes, I think couple of examples I personally worked on. So I worked on a project where we had a yellow pea company, which is growing yellow peas to create different products, and also as input ingredients for what do you call it? Not the fake. I don't like the word fake meat, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Alternative meat.
Yeah. Alternative protein. Thank you. And so they have some supply areas where they grow here in the US, but they're worried. There are two worries. One was they want to expand their business. Guys, if you are going to talk, can you stay on mute? Thank you. Unless you have a question, then don't stay on mute. And so there are two concerns. One was they want to expand their business. So where do we find additional areas where we can grow this crop? And number two, they're worried that because of climate change, their existing places from which they source their yellow peas they might either have lower yield or they might not be able to plant that crop. Planting some other crop might be more valuable. And so we help them using a combination of remote sensing data, weather, soil patterns, etc. We're able to help them narrow down their search in a different part of the world and to say, hey, this is an area where you should investigate whether this is a good place to source yellow peas from, to grow them there and source them from, right? So I think there are different examples as people are worried about where you can grow crops and which type of crops you can grow from a climate change standpoint.
Yeah, and also maybe I'll wear a bit of a cynic's hat also in this here, right? I think, some of you might wonder, would a farmer take a decision on sowing and cropping based on some of the system's recommendation? It's a fair question. And I think what is important here, as Rhishi rightly pointed out, is that your universe of search options are being shown here. And ultimately, it's a decision for the individual and for them to take, for a grower to take based on what is the kind of pathway they choose there. These are give you options. Like at the end of the day, if I go to my maps, I give you options, but I choose which route to go. So I think that's also important to have this in mind here. The last example that I want to maybe talk about in detail is one of my favorite ones. We added this because last time in the last session, somebody said, I've not seen a good example of generative AI. This is one of the most fascinating examples for me personally, because this is a good example of what the kind of power we can do when we have a more sophisticated systems here. Now, this is collected. I'll give you the context of this example here. So this is the Syngenta's data from Latin America. And then this is done by a computer scientist where he wrote this long prompt. And which is, as you can see, this is a very technical prompt that was written. And then the chat GPT was able to generate this data visualization, which showing where Syngenta's the good growth soil conservation program was implemented and what have been the results of that data. So, of course, as the scientist uses this in this example, and he quotes this in a blog post, and he says that, he had to do some bit of tweaking here, but a chat GPT system could churn out this, this sort of data visualization system purely from the data sources that have been pointed out, thrown at the system, gives you a sense of what will happen in the near future when you have the ability to churn out create a prompt like this, right? The organization called Syngenta Good Growth Plan, because there is a data set that's given. And then he's saying now select this column called country, and then select benefited hectares, and then build a map that will show the map of the world. So if you start to get a sense of how we will create these kind of prompts in the near future and what kind of help we will get, you'll get a sense of what all we could do with a generative AI system. And that's where I really like this example here. Are there any other, sort of generative AI specific interesting use cases that you've seen, Rhishi, here?
Yeah, I think a lot of the use cases, at least within agri-food. So there's a project I recently finished, which was with a food company. And the problem they were trying to solve is because of supply. For example, the price of cocoa right now has shot up because of some supply issues. So all your chocolates are going to be expensive very soon. Sorry to break the bad news here if you didn't know about this. But then a lot of companies are coming to them and saying that, hey, if cocoa is going to be in short supply, we need to replace cocoa with some other ingredient without changing the quality of the product. And cocoa is probably not a great example, but there are other ingredients which might be in short supply. And the way food scientists solve that problem today is they will put out feelers to their ingredient suppliers, get a bunch of data in PDF and all sort of unstructured data for different ingredients. Then they will manually sift through all that. Then they'll pick 3 options, and then they will do what is known as benchtop testing. They will test it for different manufacturing capabilities, viscosity, taste, heat, all of that. And it's a very manual and painful process. And so what we're able to do is to use generative AI to help sift through all that unstructured data and basically to Venky's point of the search problem, that generative AI was able to really reduce the time to go from a large number of options to a fewer options.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there's some interesting questions from Mike there. I think Mike, your question, I think we will cover it in the upcoming slides there where we talk about AI tech stack. Your point is important, that your question is important, that yes, whether the signal network will be up to the task. I think we will cover that. Uh, you know, before we come there, maybe we'll also talk about what kinds of innovators are kind of betting in right now, because you may be seeing all of these examples and wondering, where do we really begin, right? And I think that's an important aspect in terms of did I skip the slide, or are we in the right flow with that, Rishi?
no, I think we're in the right spot. Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite framework from Simon Wadley, where he talks about there are three different kinds of people in an organization, and in an organization context, this could apply to departments. So there is always a department that is doing a lot of fail-safe experiments, and they are largely the pioneers. And then there is settlers. I know it's a bit of a colonialist term, but bear with me for this framework here. Settlers are those who are sort of midway trying to adapt what is technologies in their current business context. And town planners are looking at how this will change our business requirements here. So the reason why we're using this, highlighting this framework here is it's important to distinguish between these three types of people in any organization, right? If you sort of there are no one size fits all kind of way to approach innovation, but it may be helpful to kind of categorize each different teams and then plan your experiments on AI here. We'll get on to specifics here. Like for instance, if you're a pioneer, you will talk about business problems and quick wins. Whereas if you're talking about settlers, you're talking about transition to existing products. And finally, if you're a town planner, you worry about what are the business requirements here. What are the some of the challenges that you've seen, Rishi, in sort of helping each of these kind of teams to sort of to bet on AI?
Yeah, I think like for example, if we talk about any of these groups, right? I think what is the mindset and the culture and the type of person who falls into these buckets is oftentimes different, right? So for example, just as the label says, pioneers, these are the types of folks who are tinkerers. They want to experiment. They want to try 10 different things and see what works and what doesn't. And they use these experiments as a learning mechanism, right? So the experiment is not to see failure or success. The experiment might fail or succeed, but the outcome is, what did we learn from it? And so they are really good at designing these small experiments, which can help you understand a particular aspect of a problem, and what are the dimensions which have an impact on that. So that's why if you're just starting on the AI journey, I think you should look for people who are more like pioneers, who like to tinker, who are not afraid of trying different things. If you're much further along, you always need all three, don't get me wrong, because always new things will come along. But that's one thing about pioneers. Maybe settlers and town planners, maybe, Venky, if you want to talk about settlers, and I can maybe talk about town planners. Yeah.
Sure. I think we got a very good example, live case study from the question I think Rhishi has asked. Is AI being used to rationalize trade agreements and arrangements, both domestic and international? I think this is a great settlers question here, right? At least from the systems that I have seen, right now, humans have this ability to rationalize whatever they're doing, based and select the data that fits their biases and their assumptions. And that's where if you are a settler who is trying to integrate an AI system into your, let's say for rationalizing trade decisions, right? Or if you want to find out who are the kind of suppliers there. So it's very important to see how these kind of challenges are well taken. And that's where, the advice that we are talking about here is to don't rush to deploy enterprise-wide, right? So when it is being experimented, it's worthwhile to keep them in a bounded sense. And I think that's important aspect here, to be mindful of. There's also another question that is pertaining to the settlers there, but I think that I'll also tackle in at the same time here. I think Pavneet was asking about how do you manage a risk of data ownership and possible IP. right? And this is exactly why we are talking about don't rush to deploy enterprise-wide. And if you create this as a bounded, particular to an organization, a particular to a department here, then you could very well handle the risk in terms of who is going to use that systems and what are the boundaries in which people are going to deploy in, right? So that's where, again, it's a settler problem in terms of managing the risk there, because you can't directly look at enterprise-wide challenges there. You have to first design the rules and from a specifically to a department or an organization context there. Yeah. Rishi, why don't you talk about the town planners here?
Yeah, I think these are people who, come in a bit later in the process when things are more mature. And these people are extremely important because if you want to scale what you're working on, because big impact will be created at scale. Pioneers, as Venky pointed out, really good at these small scale experiments to learn. Settlers can sort of figure out how to grow within the organization, maybe a little bit outside the organization. And town planners can think system wide, and they can also understand what type of data is needed, what other systems do we need to really have an impact with this particular project or capability that we are working on, right? So it's not that one is right or wrong. You need all three. It is just depends on which stage of evolution and maturity you are on for a particular project. And this is not AI specific, by the way. I just want to call that out. Right? This framework that Venky is talking about. I think it applies to any set of problems,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I'll also sort of I think, yeah, maybe we'll go down to the next one. Once. I think there was a question around what about the I'll just go back to the question. Yeah, the cell network, do they have the capability of tackling an AI power? And I think this is where it's important to understand the AI technology stack. Today, right now, a lot of action is happening on the top layers. This is from Michael Parekh, who's a technology analyst. It's his framework here. I'm happy to share more details also. What this does is it's sort of mapping on the y-axis, your market caps, and on time, and then getting what kind of blocks of technologies right now we are seeing in here. As you can see from the blue highlight here, the bulk of action and the exciting action is happening on the top layers. But what this will lead to is it'll further trickle down innovations in the bottom areas, whether it's AI models, and that's where how do you strengthen your compute systems to kind of tackle the load that the top layers there. Rishi, why don't you maybe also elaborate on some of these aspects, so that people get a sense of what we are talking about.
Yeah. And I think the reason there's a reason why we've chosen this color code here, right? So companies like NVIDIA, TSMC, or whoever, they are going to continue to develop these GPUs and TPUs, and they're also going to be looking at all the layers above them to say what are the types of problems and use cases people are thinking about solving, and how do we need to design the underlying hardware so that it is optimized for solving those problems. So for example, hardware used for training a model might be different than what is needed to run inference in real time. I think this was the other Michael who is on this call with a similar last name. Like if you want to run something on the edge, right? I think the type of hardware that you need there is a bit different than what you would need in a data center when things are running in the cloud, right? So these people are going to pay attention to what's happening above them in the stack so that they can design the hardware appropriately. Similarly, cloud providers, they're going to pay attention to what's happening below them and above them so that they can define and design the right cloud services. And the reason these things are in red is because if you're working in the agri-food context or any industry, you typically don't need to worry about what's happening in the red columns, right? Sorry, the red boxes. That's something that will continue to evolve. Maybe you can give feedback to these companies, say, these are the types of use cases we need to be solved, and the current hardware, the current cloud, or the current AI model is not working for us. Please give us better tools, right? That's absolutely fair game, but that is something that typically you are not going to be worried about. I think you're going to be more worried about all the data that we talked about, all the applications that you build, And the one in purple is, this is where sort of the boundary gets a bit blurry. You might need a different set of tools to solve your industry specific problems, right? So this is also a framework for you say, I don't need to worry about what's happening with GPUs. I need to worry about my tools, my data, and the application that I'm building.
Yeah. No, I think, it's worthwhile to also delve into this slide a little more deeper in terms of, this is the current snapshot of what we are seeing right now. This is not a finite end state here, right? So, like there is a very interesting paper which was written some time back, which talks about why we need AI, smart agriculture foundational models, right? And at least from what I am hearing from within some of my conversations with some of the digital agriculture companies, some of them are trying to see if they can come up with smart agriculture foundational models that sort of processes about last 50, 100 years of weather data, crop agronomy data, right? And so we are, as we build on the top layers, right? The bluer ones, we are also slowly going down to the purple and the red ones also eventually over time, right? Obviously, there is a huge question of budget, and there is also the huge question of energy, right? Unless you think I'm an optimist here, running these GPUs are energy inefficient. And right now, we saw the case of Stability AI almost going out of business because they couldn't afford to pay the energy bills or the data compute bills. So we see a lot of challenges also in as we go down the downstream stack here. But we are hoping that some of the technologies innovation that are happening could help us do this in a better way, right? And that's where we see it's important to, that's why we are saying it's important to pay attention to the top layers at this point currently, and eventually as we build innovations, we might probably able to go down the down stack also, right? I think Mike has a question on, are there any strategics that you think are particularly far ahead on adoption or use cases? Brazil's fintech industry is a very good use case. Recently, I was talking to a person who is sort of working with a lot of Brazilian fintechs, and there he was telling me interesting data of how the insurance industry is way ahead the curve, because the insurance industry typically uses either a parametric insurance or you have a reinsurance models, and in these parametric insurance models, depending on what kind of systems are deployed, your risk ability and your risk scores and your credits gets underwritten, right? So insurance industry is really doing a lot of work. I think Trive Finance is also from Brazil, right, Rhishi? And you've spoken with them.
Yeah.
Are there any other examples you think, which is like leading the curve here?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of work been done on the product discovery side, especially genetics, with like, phenotyping work and those type of approaches have been around, but AI is definitely opening up the funnel in terms of the search problem, right? I think, Mike, it's probably early to say. Different people are trying different experiments, but those are some of the examples which come to mind. I think a lot of the equipment companies are very much trying these things, like with John Deere, or a lot of we saw the example of CNH. There are a lot of startups in the robotic space in terms of really pushing the envelope of combining AI with sensors and hardware. So I think equipment companies are really pushing the envelope, I would say.
Yeah. And also I just got an example of Inari, which is also coming up with like what you said, right, in terms of discovery, trade discovery, genomics data, ASICs data, nomics data. I think there are a lot of interesting players that are kind of disrupting, coming up with newer traits there. I think Vidushi has a question of how is AI disrupting cost and speed for smallholding farmers? Vidushi, would you like to elaborate? What do you mean by cost and speed? Are you talking about speed to market, or are you talking about speed of cultivation here? Okay, measurements. So soil health measurement, I think, what is right now happening, at least to the best of my understanding, is governments maintain soil health database, right? Today, there are companies that are managing countrywide government data in terms of soil health. So now you have better models that tell you whether your soil is a saline soil or a sodic soil, what are the right pH levels for your district, right? Today, we know that for a soil, if it crosses 0.7, and it has to go beyond 0.7 to maintain a good soil organic carbon levels, right? Now, at a local district level, can you get a sense of what kind of soil pH levels are there in your neighboring district, right? Because one of the things that we are right now seeing with climate change is that there is emphasis more on the microclimatic models rather than larger models. So we are seeing that play out here in this aspects where with technology getting smarter and better to recalibrate with your local microclimatic data and then give the right set of recommendations, let's say, to farmers on what their soil organic carbon is and what they should be doing to as remedial actions here. Yeah. Okay, there's
the question from Joe, right? I think, can you address democratizing of data with respect to data ownership among private company governments meant to promote public access? Yeah, this is a very hairy question and a very difficult question.
You want me to get a shot?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, I think there are two ways here, and I'll let Rhishi also address it from a large company's perspective. One is that you saw us talk about data cooperatives. That is one way of democratizing data here. And that's exactly why I included that example here. The second is data commons. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is investing a lot on a global data commons network. So there are certain efforts that are being done. But like Rhishi rightly pointed out, it's a hairy problem. Many times there is intent that's spelled out, but what is happening under the ground is also a challenge. And there's also another aspect of in India, one interesting example is just far ahead of the curve is there are data ombudsmen. Ombudsman is somebody who will sort of like a data middleman or a data broker who will sort of manage what data requests are coming in and then find out whom to pay reward. So in the state of Karnataka, there's a data ombudsman system that has been built where, let's say if there are a startup that is collecting data from farmers and is leveraging it for a particular use case, this ombudsman will make sure that the companies will reward farmers. So some such experiments are happening there. But Rhishi, you were getting down to risk before I thought I cut you short. Yeah.
No, I think, what you're saying is right. I think one of the challenges that has happened in AgTech, and maybe I'm speaking more this from a North America perspective, is that the way, if I'm a farmer, I need my, seed data, I need my fertilizer data, I need all of the data, I need my insurance, I need, financing, I need all of this data. But the way a lot of these AgTech companies have come along, they want to, so as a farmer, I want sort of a vertical stack of all my different data elements to make better decisions. But a lot of the companies, they only want to aggregate sort of horizontally, right? So for example, if I'm a fertilizer company, I'm interested in your nutrition data, and I'm interested in nutrition data from, many, many farmers. And so all these chunks of data have gone to these different companies in a horizontal fashion, whereas I need something as a farmer, which is vertical. And I think that's where the idea of data commons is very interesting, because now you can use it as a way. It's almost like an escrow model, right? But that's very difficult to pull off. So if you guys are aware of more examples, we'd love to know more about them. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, we about last 20 minutes there. We have a final takeaway slide here, but it'd be great to hear your voices also, along with all the interesting comments that are happening and questions that are happening in here. So anyone has any reflections here? Maybe why don't we, Rhishi, maybe should we do the last takeaways part and then come to the open up the floor?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so what the last part before we get down to the takeaways are, what kind of projects that are ripe for AI? Sorry. One second. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, when two people try to control one system, I think this is what happens. But so, what types of projects are ripe for AI? I think this must be obvious if you follow the conversation so far. Whatever is time consuming, labor intensive, and this is exactly why AI is an empowering aspect here, right? You can, whatever is drudge work, we have an option to sort of move people to take a more challenging and more creative work that sort of that has an ability to stay at the boundaries of different systems, right? And that's where the aspect that are repeatable workflows and wherever you need faster retrieval, some of these projects are ripe for AI, and you could design this in a way where the agency goes back to the humans to decide what to take on, and who will pay, who will kind of control what systems to be working on. Yeah, Rishi, you want to add anything to the to this part here?
No, I think we've covered through the examples. This is just a summary of the of sort of up-leveling those examples, right? So maybe we can go to the takeaways.
Sure. So the final key takeaways are, yeah, this is obvious. The time to play with AI is now. Let me give you a very historical sense of what we really mean by this, right? If you go back to history, during the Renaissance and the period when humans experienced a fundamental shift in how they reason about the world, right? If you allow me for a minute to talk about from a philosophical aspect of how humans reason, right? For humans to reason, we need three things. You need a tool, you need a medium, and you need a language. With AI, what we are right now seeing is we are seeing disruption in all the three. We are disrupting our conception of tools. We are disrupting our conception of what a medium could be, because it's getting more contextual, more in-house, more which was never the case in the recent times. And then we're also disrupting the language, because the generative AI, it is figuring out how to do rhetoric really well and how to talk like human, right? And so when we are at a pivotal change, when both the tools of coming tool, medium, and the language is being disrupted, I think it's a phenomenal change in terms of what technology could, which is where it's important to also to understand so that humans can, we can stay on the top of the game here, right? And that's where we need to foster a culture of learning and experimentation. Maybe Rishi, you may want to also add into this in terms of why is it important to foster a culture of learning, because you could get trapped in a FOMO kind of a mode, right? Like fear of missing out kind of a mode.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the best way to learn something new is by doing it, right? Yes, reading books and attending these kind of sessions helps, but it is nothing compared to actually doing it, playing with it, right? That's how we learn. Humans learn by doing, and I think this field is expanding and advancing very rapidly. As you saw, there are applications everywhere, and so I think the main key takeaway here is you need to engage with this. If you've not engaged with it so far, you need to engage with it now. And this is not to scare anyone, but this is to say the way to learn is to engage and to play with something. And that's why the culture of learning and experimentation is very important. When you try something new, when you learn something new, you don't get it right the first time. But by doing it again and again and trying different things, you learn not only about the technology and the tool, but you learn something about yourself as well, right? It reveals your own personality and your strengths and weaknesses. And that's why we want to really hammer home the point that the time to play or engage AI is now, and do it with a sense of learning and experimentation and wonder.
Yeah, I think Richie has made an interesting comment in terms of the equity, managing the equity and societal impacts. I want to also maybe briefly touch upon that. I think it's very important for us also to take that into consideration in terms of whether the technological innovations become a double whammy, right? When there is existing inequity, technology tends to increase the equity. We are not really sort of blue rose-tinted eyed optimists here. There are a lot of challenges in this, but I think for people, if somebody who's here in this webinar, I think you definitely you all have a big stake in designing the food and agriculture systems of the future. right? And that's where we need to talk about like what I think Mike talked about in terms of democratizing data aspects there. How do we build data cooperatives? How do we strengthen data commons? What are the kind of policy norms that we need to bring, right? Right now, a lot of governments are thinking about how to rethink the policy aspects, with the AI there. Like there is Ministry of AI being floated now. So there are a lot of changes happening there. And I think like Rishi rightly pointed out, we are in a period of rapid change. And that's where it's very important to stay grounded and get a sense of what is happening by actually doing the work there. Yeah. Rishi, you want to add anything to the inequity and managing the societal impact aspect here?
Yeah, I mean, those are always very difficult problems. They are not just technology problems. They are policy issues, they're economic issues, they're cultural issues. And I'm optimistic that these things, like if I take the example of the internet or mobile phones, right? When they started off, they were very expensive, and now most people, depending on their economic situation, have a mobile phone, which is a very democratic technology now, and it has really enabled a lot of people. And I think given that internet and connectivity framework and the smartphone, mobile phone network, an asset that we already have, I strongly believe that AI will, and those sidekicks, I think will, spread much more quickly and in a much more democratic fashion, because we already have built the infrastructure for a technology like this to spread.
Yeah, there is a question from Mike in terms of saying, can farmers own their data and equipment manufacturers still, the farmers own their data and equipment manufacturers still the gatekeepers? Would Gen AI be able to democratize that? Yeah, I think there is a lot of debates and going on there, but I think what Gen AI can do is at least, like today, I decide what data to go in, and I decide what are the boundaries of the decisions I make. Right. I think some of the right now there's a lot of controversy going around, with OpenAI scraping a lot of internet's public data. But now the regulations have to strengthen there and kind of play in there. So that those are some of the aspects that are kind of important here. We need to be mindful of. Yeah. So the last remaining takeaways are that we have to identify the pioneers, settlers, and town planners, and then kind of play, rather than having one size fits all. You have to identify what strengths are, and then kind of play to each organization's strength, and of course, Rishi, you want to talk about systemizing high quality diverse data? I think that's an important point, which is worth delving into.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about data ownership, and this is sort of part of that, right? I mean, for all the beauty of AI and all that, AI is data hungry, and just like anybody who has worked in tech has heard the phrase "garbage in, garbage out," right? So if you give bad quality data, the model is going to be not very good. And given that agriculture is very diverse, and I think the way we started this presentation, Venky talked about how context is very important. And as all of you know, context is everything in agriculture. And that's why having high quality data, which is diverse, which can represent the reality, the complicated and diverse reality of agriculture, is very important, because that is your only hope of building good AI models. And you want to make that process as efficient as possible. And if you can systemize that, and this is where your settlers and town planners will really help you, because they'll help you how to systemize getting access to high quality diverse data set to get really great outcomes from AI.
Yeah, and I think now that we've talked about it, it's also important to also that you're better off disrupting yourself. And I think if you're in this webinar at this time, you're definitely are in the thick of things. And I think what is better than we disrupt ourselves. And I see this largely even in farmers, right? Sorry, one second. I see this largely even among farmers who are now playing with tools. And I know in my field visits, I've seen how they're able to leverage YouTube videos and come up with newer cropping experiments there. So everybody is sort of figuring these out and figuring things out and learning to coexist in this kind of exponential technologies that are in our midst. So I think it's a great time in that way for us to, and there is also a great responsibility with the kind of powers that these technologies are throwing at us. And I hope, we all can kind of leverage in that. Talking about playing, I also want to take a minute and talk about what we have as a follow-up. If you really like what we did in this session today, we are also designing an agri-food leaders mini simulator. This is a more focused kind of environment where we will give you data and we will also show you how to play with some of these data there. So if you're looking for some kind of a guided way of how to play with systems in a more and bring in your own data systems and then see what AI is doing, this could be a very interesting workshop that you could very well benefit from. We are really sort of designing this with a simulator and where there is self-paced. We will give you some videos and then we will also have more a Q&A for and more specific Zoom sessions where you can actually live play with the data and then see what you can do. So we are right now designing this, Rhishi and I. And we invite you to sort of join us whenever we announce it. We will put out the announcement there. Rhishi, want to talk anything more about this specifically here?
No, I think, I mean, as in the spirit of you need to engage with this and need to play with this, and I hope all of you are playing with tools like ChatGPT and Gemini, whatever your favorite LLM is. I mean, that just, if you remember that circle that Venky showed in terms of what is AI, that is just one piece of it. I hope you are engaging beyond that, or at least at a bare minimum with things like Gen AI. And this is in that spirit. We want to give you the tools with give you hands-on experience with data that is specific to the domain that we're talking about and see how AI works. And so we're going to work with an engineering firm to help us set that up, right? So I hope some of you will join that class.
All right. So, we've almost covered what we wanted. So, but, now's the time we would love to hear your thoughts, reflections. We've chatted a lot in the text there, but it'd be nice to hear your voice and hopefully some videos also, if you could turn on. It'd be nice to hear from all of you. We'll probably close up the slides and maybe, get to have a more conversation here.
So I think while you're thinking about your questions, or maybe you already have them, I'm going to pop up a quick
survey
poll here.
Yeah,
it's just 3 questions. So while you're thinking about it, we just want to get feedback from you on how the session went, so that we plan to do more of these. So hopefully we can learn from your feedback. So I'm going to launch this here. And, also if anybody has questions, I'm sure there are some questions that we can address.
Yeah, and if you're okay, we can extend it to 10 more minutes. We put the hard stop at 90 minutes, but we are open to extend it for 10 or 15 more minutes if there are interesting questions that you might want to discuss in person. Yeah. Yes, was there a question? Sorry, I heard some. All right, so it's a starting trouble, I suppose, in terms of getting people to move, open up their mics. Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask a question. Thanks so
Yes,
much for setting this up. So you obviously had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people in the industry, both in the broadacre side and then also in the smallholder side. If in a non-scientific way, I guess, if you could just roll off, what are some of the top pain points that people think Gen I will address in the next 2 to 3 years?
I can take that question from on the more from a US, Canada, EU context. You specifically asked about Gen AI. I think some of the earliest things that people are looking at are things like customer service. That is one. Number 2, which is how do we up-level our own employees, especially field folks. So if you have a bunch of agronomists out there in the field, or you have equipment dealers, or you have salespeople who are out there talking to your end customers, which are growers, how do we up-level them with all the information and the data we already have, and a lot of it is proprietary? how do we help them, do a much better job at providing a better customer service to our end customer, right? So that is sort of the second one is just pure customer support. Second is how do we up-level our own employees to serve our customers better. And then third is sort of in a similar vein, how do we bring together multiple types of data with both structured as well as unstructured, because a lot of these programs are good at structured data, but they're also really good at unstructured data. How do we bring those two together to uncover some new insights? So those are some of the broad, I'm sort of talking at a very high level, some of the types of problems that people are thinking about, at least in the US, Canada's, EU's context. Maybe Venky, if you want to talk about what's happening in the developing world.
Sure. In countries like India, I think what is happening. I mean, at least from a broader sense in agri-tech SaaS companies is we are seeing a verticalization happening, right? Like a specific LLM which is only dedicated to agricultural finance. Like Bloomberg launched their Gen AI tool. So likewise, I see aspects of the pain points is like let's say I have last 40 years of credit data or insurance data. Rishi, I think, yeah. So last 40 years of, let's say, insurance data there, how do we process this data and how do we kind of make sense of it? As I said, it's a conversational contextual tool, right? Like, so I can ask questions and think of it as a whiteboard and kind of play with it there. So those are some use cases that are happening in here. Of course, we have, we have other aspects of sort of giving information as from a knowledge management standpoint, like how do we communicate like aspects of, like, for instance, for an agronomist, what are the kind of data that he has to collect in, so and sort of think of it. It's also playing a lot of knowledge management roles. That's a larger sort of pain point that I see many ones there, because there's a humongous amount of data out there. So these tools are becoming helpful ways for people to digest a lot of data and engage with it in a more creative way here. Yeah. Any more questions? Thanks. I saw also some comments here.
I'll
Thanks,
shoot
Jack.
one.
Yeah, Kenny.
Hey, thanks for the session. I really appreciate it. I know we've been talking about for decades that data is the new gold, and I actually really like the camera analogy of AI being able to shine a better light, a better lens to look at the data that we've collected so far. But I think this highlights the fact that how important the data is, and actually who owns the data, as you guys pointed out. But one of the things where like my mind goes is there's the macro trend data that's available, publicly available, that we can all collect. But there are also like very specific, very temporal sensitive data that needs to be collected now, whether it's through IoT devices, so that growers can make timely decisions, which could be hours to days. That's very time sensitive. Do you see where those type of trends are going, and what type of either equipment or technology stack is made available in conjunction with AI that you guys see the trend moving toward?
Very interesting question.
Yeah,
Rishi, you want to take the tackle in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a great answer, but let's see. One, I think it's a very challenging question. I think some of the things people are trying to do is, one is how can you reduce the time between data collection and an actual decision, right? And that's where you see a lot of the real-time applications. And Kenny, I think we met at one of the events. You guys run the you got the Eigen folks, right?
Yeah, we
okay.
run the robots now.
Yeah. So like, what your company is doing, or what a lot of other people are doing, you collect the data and you make a decision right on the spot, right? And so that is one modality to get value from data quickly. I think that is one. I think second is more and more edge capabilities are coming along as these processors become more and more powerful. And in that case, maybe the raw data, stays sort of local, and the summary or what you want to extract from it sort of travels here and there. So that is another mode that you're seeing. And I think, going back to that sort of diagram of, CPUs, GPUs, cloud, etc. And we saw this in the mobile space also, right? It had a direct impact on the hardware design, and that's where sort of ARM came along and did a much better job compared to Intel, because your power availability and some of this and the processing on the phones initially was much lower. And how do you design hardware and sensors which can work in those type of environments, right? So those are some of the ways in which people are trying to address these issues. That does not answer your data ownership question. I think that is still a big question mark.
Yeah, maybe I'll tackle this from a different angle here. See, right now, I'm talking from obviously from a small holding context here. Right now, with climate change, what is happening is governments and countries are realizing that food security is a bigger problem, and so they are setting up centralizing systems that are at a macro level through digital public infrastructure. Right. In India, we see a lot of glimpses around this, where there is now in India, in Delhi, there's an agricultural command center, where the top honchos of the government get to go into these rooms where, as you see in these movies, right? Like you have these multiple screens flashing over. So they have this agricultural command center where you get to see the entire country's production trends, and sensors are being installed to sort of monitor what is the fertilizer subsidy there. So a lot of aspects are getting very interesting now in terms of, because of its climate change, they want to manage some of this data and see where to take risk, where to immediately take action, right? So I feel DPI is going to change. Digital public infrastructure is going to change a lot of some of the macro aspects of how we will collectively take decisions. Unfortunately, I don't know whether you're a libertarian or not, but overall, it could be a lot of government also intervening in. If you look at it from a political aspect here, we see this trend sort of going to happen specifically from an agriculture, because food security is a government problem there. So some of those conflicts are also going to come in terms of, is the government going to own the data, or is the farmer is going to own the ownership there? So some of those conflicts are expected to come, and right now they're already emerging out in country like India. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Great. Any more questions? Yeah, we're almost past time, but if there are more questions, we can maybe hang around for a minute, or otherwise, thank you very, very much for all of you for tuning in. For some of you, I know it must be late in the evening, and for folks in India, it's your morning time. Thank you for patiently listening to all of us, all our chat. I hope we are useful, and it was useful, and we hope to see you all in upcoming sessions.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I hope this was useful, and we'll take some of the feedback from this session, and hopefully we can use that to for future sessions.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a good day, and have a great week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.